Welcome to the Massif Impact Show. I'm your host, Taylor Reed. Today, I've got my co-host with me, Nathan Fort, Matthew Rowley, and a very special guest, a friend of mine, Ron Evans. He's the founder of The Vault at Scottsdale. Ron, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We're excited to have you on. So tell us a little bit about The Vault, what it is we're looking at
this
here.
incredible place we're sitting in.
Yeah.
It's going to be hard to stay focused with all of this around us.
It has been a goal of mine for quite a few years to have a place, one, to put all of my collection of signs, cars. I knew I was going to be starting another business when we exited our previous business. Cars have been my passion and love since I was a couple of years old. So it was always going to be in the automotive space. We looked at several businesses, decided that at the end of the day, I wanted to create something from the ground up. So chose to build an automotive storage facility as well as an event venue that was unique that you don't see anywhere else. You won't get anywhere else in Scottsdale or the Valley for that matter.
And I've been really impressed, being a Scottsdale local, how open you are, where everybody feels welcome to come. And you've done a good job creating that.
Thank you. It's my personality.
Yeah.
I'm just not wired that way. I'm wired and growing up on a farm, the way I was raised, however you want to call it, that I look at this as my personal man cave that I'll share with 200 of my closest friends.
Right.
Every third Saturday of the month for Cars and Coffee or for an event. Want everyone to feel welcome coming in.
You just raised the man cave bar through the roof. So a lot of man caves are put to shame with this. This is pretty
just
incredible.
My little piece. I call it the place to put all my junk.
You have a different definition of junk than most people, Ron.
One man's junk.
Another man's treasure.
I wouldn't call a Ford GT junk by any
Stuff.
definition.
We'll call it stuff.
Yeah. So I have a question for you, Ron. I grew up on a farm also.
Mm-hmm.
What did you farm?
Corn, beans, wheat. My cousin and his kids still farm the same land my great-great-grandparents homesteaded in 1890 on the bank of the Mississippi. So when the crops were flooded from the floods of the Mississippi, they grew rice and sunflowers. And then when the water went back, they went back to corn, beans, and wheat.
Walk our listeners through. You're an entrepreneur. That's why we're here.
Mm-hmm.
Successful. That's why you have a good place to keep your stuff.
Mm-hmm.
My question for you, or would you please walk us through a day in the life of the farm kid? I mean, you don't have to go into terrible detail, but let people know what it's like as a day in the life of a farm kid and why farms breed so many entrepreneurs.
And maybe some lessons you learned from farming that benefited you later in life.
Number one, you're up at 4 a.m. I still wake up about 5 a.m. with no alarm clock every day, no matter how late I stay up. You're up before dawn. In our case, we also had chickens and hogs in the whole 9 yards. So whether it's feeding chickens or the hogs, or you're on a tractor before dawn with headlights. I learned to drive when I was 8, driving a tractor. By 10, I was driving a 2.5-ton grain truck sitting on a phone book and wood taped to the pedals. So you finish when the job's done. Usually about 6:30. They call you for supper, not dinner, supper in the Midwest. And grew up in biscuits and gravy were a food group, meat and potatoes. You walk across, pick your corn, go in and cook it. And then we moved away from the farm in late grade school, junior high. My family was the only family. My dad was in education, so the only non-farmer of the group.
Mm-hmm.
But we spent every summer down there the rest of my life until I was an adult. So my vacations were working on the farm. My grandfather never made it past a 6th grade education, but he could tell you his crop yields, his amount per bushel, and what he was going to make that year in his head without a calculator.
Wow.
Most common sense I've ever known of one person that didn't have a traditional education. A lot of life lessons learned that way.
So, Ron, do you miss farming?
No. I love going back when the leaves are changing in the fall. I don't miss the snow. I don't miss shoveling the snow. I don't miss the humidity in the summer, the mosquitoes. But I love it in the spring and when the leaves change in the fall.
So I know I kind of knew you probably wouldn't miss farming. Would you change it?
No. Fantastic way to grow up.
Yeah.
You learn a work ethic. You learn family values. We slept when they left their keys in the car and the doors were unlocked at night. You don't get that anywhere, even on the farm now. You, as a kid, you leave Saturday morning and you're gone all day and you show up for supper. And your parents didn't worry about where you're going because you're in a town of 500 people. Right. Everybody knows everybody. You're out riding bikes or playing or doing something else. So I wouldn't change it for a thing because it molded who I was, even though farming wasn't something I ever wanted to do. My dad always wanted to live in Arizona, moved us out here when I was in 8th grade and hated him for it. And moved to a small town called Safford, Arizona, about 3.5 hours south of here, where in the middle of the desert. But that is the first town that had a stoplight that I'd ever lived in. Now, we live 30 minutes from Bloomington Normal, which is where Illinois State is, town of 100,000. So we were close to a larger town, but I'd never lived in a town with a stoplight till I was in the 8th grade.
So, Ron, I don't think a lot of people realize like a tractor is the lifeblood of a farm. I mean, it's everything. It's everything. And they're 10 years old. They're putting you up in the tractor, telling you to drive it. And the weight and responsibility you feel with that, knowing that your family's lives are at stake. If you misuse the machinery, you can hurt them. You're responsible for something huge at a young age. How did that help you as an entrepreneur later?
Well, it teaches you the value of you take care of things, you listen, you learn. The work ethic, the do what it takes to get the job done are all things that you, whether it's the Midwest in general or being on a farm, that you don't really get in a lot of other places. My other lessons along the way, my grandfather always paid cash for everything. If he couldn't pay cash for it, he didn't buy it. Yeah. Every 2 years, he bought himself a new truck. My grandma got a new Cadillac. But if he didn't, they were snowbirds later in life. But if he didn't pay cash for it, he didn't buy it. So debt-free, work hard, save your money, pay cash when you're ready is what I learned at a young age.
Were there experiences you had or individuals you knew or mentors that kind of helped you get to a place in your mind where you were convinced you wanted to be in business for yourself? When did that happen for you?
That's a longer journey. So my wife and I met in healthcare in school to become a respiratory therapist. We spent almost 20 years working ICU and trauma here locally in Arizona, some of the largest teaching hospitals. But I was always working a second job, picking up extra shifts. We did some side hustles. I bought and sold. I was doing that at age 10. I had 3 jobs. Besides working on the farm, I shoveled snow, I mowed lawns, I had a paper route. I was always doing.
You were not afraid of work.
My own money. My dad would not give me an allowance, so if I wanted something, I had to make the money to buy it. In high school, I worked full-time job through high school and college while going to school, and then we started a business. We got into sales in the 90s, medical sales, and then we started up a company for someone else where he had the money but no knowledge. And that really taught me that, yes, I could do this. We started up a company just like the one we owned with the goal that if we built it to $1 million in the first year, I would get equity.
This was the company that you started for somebody else.
Right. 2001. I did not get that on paper. And I learned the value of trust but verify.
There's a lesson learned right there.
That's right.
I did it on a handshake, which is the way I was raised.
Yeah.
Year came and went.
It's hard to enforce.
We had hit $1 million. It was profitable. It was growing. He said, I have no recollection of that conversation.
Yeah. He
said, I'm going to leave and come back tomorrow. Came back tomorrow. Wasn't going to do it. I said, I can't afford to work for someone who has your set of morals and values. And I walked away for the first time in my life without a job to go to. Now I had a full-time job the next day. Because when you work and you establish a relationship, it's about building relationships, whether you're working or you're an entrepreneur. It's building relationships and a reputation of someone that when I left a place, I always had a standing offer to come back and work there.
Yeah,
that's great.
You never burned bridges.
And you also had developed a pretty significant culture of hard work just within yourself.
Yes, from the time I was 20, I've never worked less than 80 hours a week.
Yeah. So do you feel like you had that level of confidence in yourself that, hey, I can walk away from this and I'm not concerned. I can make things work.
My wife also worked for the company. So she walked away 3 weeks later. But the doctors that were sending us business were ones that we were in the hospitals with 20 years earlier. So we had met them when they were residents. Now they're in private practice sending us business. They knew us as respiratory therapists, not a salesman trying to sell them to send us business. Long story short, left the company. He sold it 7 months later for a quarter of the value because as soon as we left, the relationships left. We went to work for a national company for a year and a half to develop further relationships with other doctors. And then I left, went back to work at Phoenix Children's for a contract job that I worked from 4 a.m. to noon to put my 8 hours in on a project they needed done, with the agreement that from 12 to whenever it took, I started starting our own company. We started it with a home equity loan on our house and one employee and 800 square feet in 2006. Currently, that company is about $60 million of revenue today, a little over $65 million in revenue today.
Wow.
We had a nice exit in 2018. I stayed on until 2020 to run the company. Left as COVID was starting, but we built it from scratch to 38 locations in 10 states and about 350 employees over that 15 years.
And you and your wife built this together.
Built it
You guys
from
are working together through all this.
I did the operations and clinical. She was doing marketing and sales, but we each could do the other one's job. Our together time was we did all the on-call for the first 3 years. So at 2 a.m., I'm driving out to Palo Verde Nuclear Station halfway to California to deliver a $100 piece of equipment, because that you do what other people won't do.
Those are the dues you pay right there.
Right.
To pay
That's
your
how you
dues.
get lucky in business.
Yeah, exactly.
Luck.
So
That's luck right there. That's what it looks like.
Yeah.
the phones
That's right.
after hours and on the weekends rang to my personal cell for 5 years. That they got a real person on the phone, not an answering service. And so that built a reputation that when they needed something, we would deliver. And that we did the stuff that we lost money on, building the reputation. And then we started getting business and we started growing. And along the way, we got cut 70% reimbursement. We bought 10 companies over 8 years. We bought 10 other companies to expand into other states, as well as growing our footprint in Arizona. And God blessed us.
Wow.
That's awesome.
You guys were in the long game for sure.
It was, and I actually would have probably stayed 5 years. Obviously, things change once private equity comes in and they're in charge.
Yep.
Yeah.
I won't say who it was or the name of the company, but we left some equity in the company. And I stayed on the board for a couple extra years until last year. And we got this off the ground. So I was, from day one, I lasted about 3 weeks sitting at home after the sale went through.
Yeah.
Or after I left, I should say.
Right.
And then it was a matter, we'd already bought this land, but it took us 2 years for permits. So for 2 years, I ate, slept, and breathed designing this place to the way I wanted it. It's not the biggest, it's not the fanciest compared to some, but it's mine.
Yeah.
And it's paid for.
Right.
And I built it with the money that I made, not someone else's money.
That's
and
pretty
that to
cool.
me was the thing that I was always taught to me is it's not yours until you own it, and it's not yours until you own it free and clear.
So
You learned that early on with the chickens, right? You don't catch them. You don't count them till they hatch.
Exactly. And you the
It's a farm lesson, right?
Yeah,
and
right.
forgive
Right.
the vegans out there, but the hogs aren't worth anything until they go to slaughter.
That's
That's
right.
right. So your work ethic shows up in this place in another way too. And I would think your attention to detail, for folks who aren't able to see everything, how many signs, both neon, porcelain, how many signs would you say you have here?
I've never counted them.
You had to guess.
I will say that I've sold over 50 because I got tired of hanging them. So I have a
There's a lot, guys. There is a lot.
I
out
would
here.
guess
a lot of signs
100
around
at least,
this
Nate. What do you
place.
think? More? 100, 150?
And
Each one you
there's
had to
another
track
50
down.
at home.
So a few hundred at least.
Yeah,
And each one you tracked down on your own. Each
Mhm.
one has its own story.
it does.
One at a time, you went and looked for them, and you searched for
Specific
something
ones.
specific.
Yes.
It wasn't just, hey, I happened upon this at a
No.
yard sale.
It was, everyone was a specific one. Everyone has a story to it. Some are more rare than others, but it's something I always enjoyed doing. And back then I couldn't afford classic cars,
Right.
but a sign may be $150 or $200. So I had those long before I bought my first classic car. The way cars weave into our business, in 07, I had bought my first classic car, was a 67 Mustang. That second year in business, we were growing far faster than our cash flow was. And we were within 30 days of going out of business. Yet we'd done $1.6 million in our first year. But we only collected $300,000.
Right.
The only thing I had of value was that 67 Mustang. So I sold the 67 Mustang for $75,000, and we hired 2 billers to do nothing but go after Medicare and the insurance
Right.
to collect our cash. And that next year we did $3.5 million of revenue and collected $3 million of it.
Amazing.
And the Cobra that I have from 2007 and 8 was the reward for recovering,
Making that happen.
and
Yeah,
making that
there
happen.
you go.
So you have to be willing to sacrifice.
Right.
Cars I love, but they're still cars. They can be replaced. People can't be replaced. Businesses can't be replaced. At the end of the day, the business is always going to be more important, and my family, than anything else.
How do you make that, when you're starting a business, you've got these kind of hard things that you come up against, right? It's inevitable. If you're a business owner, you've got to have this do whatever it takes attitude. How do you make the judgment call of this versus that, or spending time with family versus going after business?
That is
selling
not
the car,
that is not for the faint of heart. I missed some Christmases, some Thanksgivings. I was on call.
Right.
My family knew it. None of them are entrepreneurs. They weren't very happy about it.
Right.
But I tried to explain to them that I'm building something that will carry on for hopefully several generations.
Right.
A brief example is when we sold the company, we had been fortunate and blessed enough to pay off our house. All my cars are paid off. First thing we did was set up full college accounts for our 7 grandkids. They have college paid for. The money that their parents had saved can go to their grandparent or their grandkids.
Right.
And now with our great grandchild on the way, my son-in-law is going to continue that tradition and start putting money away for his first grandchild. So my parents are taken care of. Thankfully my parents are still living. My wife's aren't. My parents are taken care of. My grandkids and kids are taken care of. That doesn't mean they get money.
Right. Right.
But that to me was what we were doing this for, was not for us. We had a nice lifestyle, made nice money. This is for the next 2 or 3 generations.
Being an entrepreneur can be really, really lonely, right?
Yes.
At what point did your kind of inner circle, close friends and family, at what point did they start to get it and go, oh, okay, we see what he's doing now? Because for me, in my story, it took years before people kind of bought into this idea that, oh, all this stuff he's talking about is going to work.
Some of them never bought in.
Yeah.
Because they just can't see it.
Right. The vision's not
or we're crazy, stupid, and now we're lucky.
Yeah. The overnight success.
I hear that all the time. Yeah. It's 15 years of an overnight success.
Must be nice.
Some of them were about 8 to 10 years in.
Yeah.
When they saw things start to change in our lifestyle, but us as a person didn't change.
Right.
Money by itself reflects character. It does not change your character. It reflects on whether your character is underlying good or bad.
Right.
And it comes up with how you spend your money.
It amplifies it.
It amplifies it.
The saying can make a good man better and a bad man worse.
That's my personal opinion.
Yeah.
And that money by itself is neutral. Money amplifies your character and what you choose to do with it. And a lot of people don't know how I choose to spend my money. They see this. They don't see the cars we've donated to charity, or the charities we donate to, or what we've done for our family, or others that are less blessed.
Or the events that you put on for, charity and things like that too.
We host several events for car clubs at no charge, charities for no charge, or at a very, very small charge just to cover the people we have to bring in.
Right.
Because we believe in giving back. Too much is given, much is required.
It's interesting. You had these signs that you saved up for years and you hung in a warehouse that you hadn't even been built yet as you were collecting them. And you came up with these desires you had to do good. And the money was like the warehouse. It just gave you a place to hang those signs.
It gave me a place to hang the signs.
Go do those things.
And then gave me the ability to collect a few cars along the way that were on my bucket list. I may have a few more on my bucket list that I may never own. But in the same token, at the end of the day, I enjoy them. I enjoy driving them. But they're still not more important than family. And they're still not more important than friendships. And so the friends that I've made along the way in this hobby are ones that can carry on for the next 20 years that I wouldn't have known otherwise. And that to me is the real value.
That's amazing. So when you walk in every morning, you see more than the vault, you see more than the cars, you see more than the signs, you see a manifestation of a lifetime of hard work. And your dream is just right here. You get to live it every day.
Yes and no. There are plans for future expansions. This won't be the only
I
thing
see.
that we do.
So it represents it, but it's not
It
complete.
represents the start. This is phase 1.
Love it.
I look forward to this.
Yeah,
This is a pretty great start,
Yeah,
Ron.
I was
absolutely.
taught very early on that you never set a goal. One, you set a goal scary and bigger than you ever think you'll achieve. If you don't hit it, you've still gone further than if you don't set a
Right.
goal in the first place. And by the time, you always need a time period on that goal and the goal itself. Halfway through, you need to be setting the second goal.
Because what if, right?
Because if you
right,
hit it,
yeah.
what's next? And
Right.
if you haven't already been working on the next goal in life, forget business, just in life, I believe in setting goals of what you want to achieve for your family, for your friends, for your relationships, for your business, for your job. Set goals for what you want to achieve, because I believe in life we're either moving forward or backwards. And so the goal was set for this business, to start this business in 2019. It opened 10 months ago in December of 2021. I'm working on, and the goal was to be full within a year and a half. We're a little bit ahead of schedule, but the goal for the next phase of what I want to do is already on the boards.
Well, we can't wait to follow
Yeah,
up
that's
as the
gonna be
years
fun.
go on. I want to see phase 2 and 3 and whatever comes after. I'm
I'm
excited
just not at
for it.
liberty to share.
No, that's okay.
Hey, Ron, I have a question for you. We hear kind of two different categories. I just am curious which one you fall in. We have people who surprise themselves by how much they can accomplish. They accomplished far more than they thought they would just by continuing to implement the right principles, do the right things. Then we have people who had a crystal clear vision, and that's exactly what they set out to do. Which camp would you say you fall in?
I tend to be the one, I thrive on people telling me I can't do something. I love proving
Challenge
people wrong.
accepted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love
You
it.
tell me I can't, and I was that way from the time I was 5 years old. If my friends told me, I dare you to do it, I had to do it.
Where do you think that
I
came
don't-
from?
I
Do you
don't-
think you were wired that way?
I'm
or
wired that way.
yeah.
And I'm the only one in my family wired that way. I am an odd duck.
Not everybody's wired
Everyone
that
else
way.
plays it safe. Whether it's doing the crazy, stupid stuff that we're lucky to survive as a kid, or people telling me we could never start a business on our own. My family telling me I was crazy.
Right.
Family told me I was crazy to get married at 21. I proposed on our second date at 20
I love this.
to someone who was 30 years old with
Decisive.
an 11 and a 9-year-old.
Love it. Yeah.
Now, we'd spent every day together studying for 9 months as study partners. So we got to be friends first. I kissed her on our first date. She shut the door in my face. I went back to make sure she was okay. Second date, 3 weeks later. Went to a nice dinner, got down on one knee, proposed. She said, I'm going to be sick, and ran to the bathroom and puked.
But probably not the reaction you were hoping
No.
for.
She had went through a bad divorce and her husband left her when her kids were 5 and 3. They were now 10 and 8.
Right.
They were 11 and 9 when we got married. She was scared to ever trust another man again. I was safe as a friend, but as far as her, she was concerned, it was her and her kids for the rest of her life. So about 10, 15 minutes later, little old lady, 70 plus years old, at the table next to us, went in the bathroom to check to see. She asked me if I wanted to go check on her. I said, please do. And she said, walked into my wife and said, "Hun, he's still down on one knee. He may be a
Wow.
keeper. You might want to go give him an answer."
Wow.
She came back, gave me an answer.
I love this.
We got married 6 months later, and we've been married 34 years.
You had an angel there to help you guys
Yeah,
out.
what a sweet
awesome.
woman. What were those 10 minutes like down there on that knee?
Excruciating. I could not feel my legs. I could not feel my leg. But I was
Really?
scared to get up.
You were really down,
You
still
were
down on one knee.
for 10 minutes.
Persistence.
Man.
Talk about
Actually
persistence.
down there
There-
on one knee for
I-
10 minutes.
There's a metaphor right
what,
there.
What was going through your mind? Can you let us in on that a little bit?
Well, I knew her history, and I knew that she was
You knew this was going to be hard
been
for her.
very open. It was very tough for her to trust anyone.
Right.
Neither one of our parents knew we were even, we really weren't dating. It was our second date. So the first conversation with my soon-to-be mother-in-law was the night I proposed. And Pam puts her on the phone, and she said,
So not traditional.
if you love my daughter and my grandkids and treat them like one of your own, I'll love you like a son. You do anything to hurt them, and I will squash you like a bug crawling across the floor.
That's a good woman right there.
And I sleep with the 38 underneath my pillow, and I'm a good shot.
I love
Puts
it.
Pam back on the phone. I was white as a ghost. I was 20 years old. Too young and stupid. It's just, if I see something I want, I go for it. And she brought the kids. Spring break was there, and so had us bring the kids for spring break. She stopped us at the door, wouldn't let us in. She wanted to grill the kids on who I was, and did the kids trust me?
Good for
Before
her.
you were in there.
Before I was in there.
Yeah.
We came back a week later. I'm like, I'm staying in the car. And she came out, come on in, all hugs, and because the kids gave me their stamp of approval.
So isn't that
Awesome.
interesting that your whole future hung in the balance while you were sitting down there on one knee? Because if you think about that, your wife, from everything I'm hearing, your wife played an integral part in your success.
Absolutely. I would not be anywhere without my wife.
How did running a business, going through this entrepreneurial journey with your wife, not just supporting you, but actually being in the business, how did that affect your relationship?
The business would not have worked without both of us. She put in just as many hours as I did.
Yeah.
Because she would go out marketing and then come out and do setups after she got done marketing, because we're both respiratory therapists.
Right.
So, and she ran billing, she ran sales, she did setups. So we each could do each other's job the same way that we did in the hospital for 20 years. We besides the age difference and the things you're not supposed to do with your spouse, work with your spouse,
Right.
start a business with
That's
your
why
spouse,
I ask. Yeah.
Kids from different marriages, age differences, you name it. We had the deck stacked against us. We're both cut from the just stubborn enough to prove people wrong.
Well, going along with the theme of when someone tells you no,
Yep.
challenge accepted. We're going to do
And
this.
we went into the marriage with the agreement that there is no back door. It's our personal belief that once you're married, you stay married.
Yep.
And
One entity.
You go through the good times, the bad, the ugly, and we've had all of them. And you come out the other side.
What's she doing now?
She is retired, loving on her grandkids any chance she gets. We take them to the beach every year with the kids and grandkids for about a week to 10 days to Coronado at a Hotel Del. That's the highlight
Coronado.
of the year.
Yeah.
And it's nice to see them as the grandkids have grown up. You have different relationships. Now that 2 are out of the house, one's about ready to go to college, you have a different relationship with them now than what you did when they were kids. So we've worked for their birthdays, for instance. We take them out to dinner individually and take them shopping for their birthday. So we get one-on-one time with each grandchild.
I love that.
They're
That's
completely
awesome.
different than when they're in a group of 5 in one family.
Yeah,
We just decided to do the same thing with our family. My wife and I have 6 kids.
Mhm.
And we realized with a lot of the group family things we were doing together, we didn't really feel like we were connecting individually with everybody. So for Christmas, we gave each of the kids a single trip with mom and dad.
Mhm.
So we're going to go do something with each one of them
I'd
individually.
encourage you to do it
It's
every year.
Changed our family, changed our
They
kids.
get their own one-on-one time. That particularly in my daughter's case, she had 5 kids by the time she was 30.
Which I'm amazed by your story. I'm just thinking of the journey you and your wife took together, right? Ups and downs, hard work, gritty, successes, triumphs, challenges, obstacles. What advice would you give to couples that are going through this together? I feel like my wife is a partner in every sense of the word in what we do. What advice would you give to couples who are entrepreneurial? They're maybe in business together, maybe not, but to keep their marriage strong, to keep their relationship fresh. What would you suggest?
One of the biggest challenges when you're in the middle of the grind is to carve out time for yourselves. And admittedly, we didn't do that as well as we should have some years, and those were the rougher years. You've got to carve out time for just you and your wife and not talk business.
Right.
You've got to have other interests.
There's the key.
How challenging was that for
Whether
you?
it's kids,
Yeah.
grandkids, but you've got to talk about something other than business, because then it's just a business meeting.
Right.
Would you schedule this? Were you
did.
intentional?
We
Say, hey, on this
in our
date,
calendar, because if it didn't get scheduled, it didn't happen.
That's
That
a
was
good recommendation.
written
right
in stone in the calendar. Back then, it was daytimers. Before everything was digital, because I grew up in a pre-cell phone era, pre-social media era.
The Stephen Covey calendars.
Yep, exactly.
Love it.
It was in our daytimers where we were going, when we missed some, we made some. Our 10th anniversary, we come home from work. The water line to the toilet had broken and been running for 5 hours and flooded our house. Our pool table was just about ready to start floating in our sunken living room.
Oh my gosh.
We got the water shut off. I said, you know what? It'll be there when we get home. We went to dinner, came back, ran to shop back, stayed up till 3 a.m. on our 10th anniversary, shop backing hundreds of gallons of water out
That's
of our
how
house.
it's done right there.
Priorities.
See, I love this. the date took priority over the flooded house. The business took priority over your favorite
did.
car. And I think that's key here, probably to a lot of your success, is just the ability to identify and distinguish what's important, what the priorities are.
Especially now, there's a lot of distractions now. These
Oh,
younger
absolutely.
entrepreneurs have a lot to overcome in the way of distraction. How would you recommend people pick their priorities like that?
So it boils down to really, you've got to establish what your priorities are and what you're trying to accomplish. That being said, it's not for the faint of heart, and it's not for everybody. Some marriages don't survive a business. Some people can work together, some can't. And identifying whether one spouse really wants to be a part of the business or along for the ride, and acknowledging that it's okay if they don't want to. Now, the other thing besides carving out time for yourself and obviously your family is knowing that there's going to be times when you fail. But as long as you communicate with each other, the best times in our marriage are the times that we communicated very well with each other, because we're all every day working opposite directions toward the same goal. But communicating as to what we got done that day and what's going on. So the other one always felt like they knew what was going on. I was the biggest guilty party of dealing with the urgent, but not the vital. There is always something. The house is always going to be burning somewhere. And you spend all day putting out fires, but you ignore the things that are vital to moving your business forward.
That are maybe not urgent.
That are not urgent.
Yeah.
But yet they're vital to the growth of your business. And then communicating that with my wife, who didn't know that what she had done that day. So communicating what's going on in the business, good, bad, ugly, when you're partners, as well as having time that you try not to talk about the business, which is extremely difficult.
Because it'd be easy to think, well, we're spending time together because we're
it's not the same.
doing all this work and business together. That's not marriage time.
But
that's
those are the
business time.
times that we would talk about what our goals were, not for the business, what we wanted to do after the business was over,
right?
What we wanted to do with our kids. Now, we had to give up time with our kids, and they were grown and out of the house before we ever started our business. So then it was what we wanted to do for our grandkids and have something to build for our grandkids and our kids down the road when we were older. Because our kids had their own kids. Now, our son waited till he was 36 to get married and has a 4-year-old and a 5-year-old at 45 years old or 44 years old. So his are 4 and 5, while my daughters are 13 to 22. So we have both ends of the spectrum.
Right.
Most guys my age have kids the same age as my grandkids, because I had cheated and married someone who had kids.
The cheat code for everybody listening. How do you pass on? Because obviously you're, like you said, you started the business after your kids and grandkids, they're all out of the house.
Mm-hmm.
So much personal development and growth happens once you start a business and you go through those struggles. How do you pass those lessons and principles that brought about all this generational change? How do you instill that in the next generation?
That is tough. And I'm having varied success depending on the personality.
Right.
I have a couple of born entrepreneurs as grandkids that I have no doubt will own their own business. My son-in-law has had his own business for years. His dad had his own business. So they've grown, and on my daughter's side, they've grown up in an entrepreneurial family. They've seen it on our side as well as the other grandparents and their dad's side. They've worked in his business. They've worked some here helping me out. So I have 2 or 3 that are born entrepreneurs. Not everybody is, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Because no business does well without people that are the visionaries and the leadership that will create the business. But they also need fantastic people to help build a business that may believe in the cause, but don't have the means or the desire or risk tolerance to start their own business. So it takes all of them to build a successful business. And you have to meet each of them at their needs. If that's not something they're involved with, but yet they all like coming here to enjoy the cars and bug me about which cars I'm going to let them drive. So for us, this was also creating something that I'll give you a quick example. I have a 16-year-old who is the biggest car fanatic in the family, had his first homecoming. He asked to come here to take his homecoming pictures. It was a 70s themed homecoming.
Oh, how cool is that?
It's gone now, but we had 2 70s Broncos. And he brought 10 of his friends. They had pizza in our conference room. and they took pictures with our 70s Broncos
Beautiful.
for their homecoming.
Yeah.
So
This is part of why we built
It's
this
a
place.
lifetime memory
That's-
for
yeah.
him.
So Ron, this is probably the last question for you, but when it seems like when we do these podcasts, there's always a word that seems to jump out. Yesterday's was persistence or relationships or impacting change. Yours, for me, the word that jumps out for you is commitment. You spoke about your marriage. Hey, there's no back door.
Mhm.
I would guess you had that same mindset with your business. Is that
Yes.
correct?
Failure was not an option because I was never going to give people the satisfaction to say we didn't make it.
And
Goes back to what
I
I
love
what
just
I said at the
stubborn.
very
Just
beginning.
stubborn.
you mentioned that you would.
love
You
it.
I
know,
am.
You're
Oh,
driving
I-
$100 parts to people. That's commitment. I mean, just
The-
throughout.
But you gotta be stubborn. You
so
gotta be
both
committed.
sides
Yeah.
of my family, my grandparents were extremely stubborn. And I say that I come by it honest because I got it from both sides of the family. More
Just
stubborn than
magnified.
anybody else in my family. My wife's mom was like that. My wife is like that. She is a fiery redhead. She will give you the shirt off her back. She's grandma. She'll give you the shirt off her back. She'll help anybody that needs it. But if you cross her family or her friends,
Watch out.
you better watch out. This is a woman who in high school was on an ROTC and was number 1 on the rifle team, who used to get hung upside down by her ankles to pick the parts out of cars by her brothers at 5 or 6 years old. So she was not a shrinking violet, but she's the sweetest thing that will give her shirt off her back to anybody. Just don't mess with a redhead.
So you're just raised in that
So
environment.
for us, it was no back door for our business, our
Yeah.
marriage, and failure was not an option.
You obviously had a huge advantage having such a dedicated partner in the business that was also your wife, right? That's
Yes.
again a cheat code, but
Absolutely.
I imagine that sets the bar really high for when you're hiring talent. How did you guys filter through and find the right people? Because that's honestly today, especially, that's the hardest thing, is to find the good.
Even
good
back
talent.
15 years ago, it was going through a lot of the wrong ones.
Yeah.
To find the diamonds in the rough. We typically tried to hire. We found the best success with people that had no experience,
Mm-hmm.
but had a similar desire to do something better for their life and their
Right.
family and train them.
Mm.
Along the way, you pick up and you get some superstars that come in and can transform your organization, that have the experience and the drive to do that, and a mix of those people. And you find a lot that use your training and experience and they go take another job with your competitor. It happens.
That's how it is.
At the end of the day, while you may be angry and upset, it doesn't, if it takes away from your business, you're letting them occupy space in your brain they're not paying rent for. So for me,
I love that.
it's next.
good.
Yeah.
Next up.
That's invoke the 4-letter word.
And
Next.
if it's me that has to pick up that slack, it was me. If it was Pam, it was Pam. Someone else, next one up, until we found the person to replace them. And we kept pushing forward because we were going to push forward no matter who was there. If you want to be on the team, great. And if you don't, I'd rather you go somewhere else and be happy than be here and be miserable.
Right.
And you have my blessing.
Right. That's a great way to look at it. I want to ask you too. Our producers are telling us to start wrapping it up, but I really want to ask you. What does this place mean to you? Like, what does it represent to you? We talked about the goals and the purpose, but the feelings of it. What does it feel like to hit your goal, to start that generational change? What does that mean to you?
It is rewarding. Some of this goes back even as a kid growing up, from the reclaimed barnwood we have in that floor was the same barnwood that was in the barns I played in as a kid that held hay for the cattle we had. My uncle and grandfather had a Texaco sign and a Phillips 66 sign on the side of their barn that we used to take pot shots at with BB guns. So I remember growing up with a lot of these gas and oil stations that went out of business in, from the 40s to the 70s. But for me, it's the being able to achieve a goal that I set out to do, which was build a place to house my stuff, but have a place that was open to other people. If someone wants to stop in and take a tour, I'll give them a tour. I'm happier being smaller than some of my competitors, but being true to myself and what I believe in. There's always someone with more money. There's always someone with a bigger business or a bigger facility or a bigger competitor. I focus on what I do best and not what other people do.
Love it. So we always end the podcast with 2 questions. First question is, if you could give any advice to the world of entrepreneurs, all these people coming up in business, what would be that last piece of advice that you would leave them with if today was your last day to give that advice?
Delay your gratification.
Huge.
If you can't pay cash for it, you don't need to buy it.
Love it. And then the last one is, what would be your last piece of advice to your kids and grandkids that would be your, thing that you want them to always remember that you knew?
The value of hard work, the value of family, and take care of your own.
Love it. Well, thanks for your time, Ron.
You're welcome.
We really, really appreciate it. That's all we have
So
for you
good.
today on the Massive Impact Show. Please like, follow, subscribe, share with your friends, and tune in next time. We'll see you.